So,
Have a seat, yes.
so where did you immigrate from?
Okay, I was born in Havana, Cuba in 1955.
1955. And um, when where where and when did you immigrate from?
Okay, what happened was, I'm sure you're aware from your study of history, that Fidel Castro had a revolution against dictator Batista. This would have been in 1959. At the time, my parents supported Fidel Castro, and unfortunately, he misled the people, and he turned to communism. So what happened was he basically took over the government, took over all private industry, jailed everybody, including my dad and many of my sisters. So I'm sure you're aware of the Bay of Pigs with President Kennedy, and basically that was a fiasco, disaster. And at that point, we had 14 children in my family, and my dad had to decide, what he was going to do to protect his family. So he decided that he was going to leave the country that he loved. So about 1961, we were able to. We gave up our two sugar mills, we gave up our farm, and we were able to bribe the wife of the Brazilian ambassador, and she was able to get us passage on a boat, a ferry boat that went between Cuba and at this particular point it was Fort Lauderdale. So out of the 14, the bottom six came with my mom to the United States in 1961 through the ferry boat.
Okay. So, did you expect this country to be your permanent residence or only temporary?
Well, at the time I was only 5, and in all honesty, as a 5-year-old, I thought we were going on a vacation trip. We were basically told just to pack our bag, a little suitcase with our clothes. So I would say at that time I did not know. I would probably say it wasn't until we settled in Washington D.C. I would say I was probably maybe in 6th grade when I finally realized what had happened and what was going on, and the fact that we were not going to go back to Cuba. We were going to always stay in the United States.
What were you expecting when you came to the United States?
Well, it's a tough one again because again I was only 5 or 6 years old. I could tell you what. No, not even my brothers and sisters would not be able to tell you what they were expecting. Both my parents were educated in the United States, and in our family we spoke both English and Spanish back in Cuba. And of course, the ones that had gone to school had studied history, so they had a pretty good idea what the United States was like. I will tell you this interesting story. My first job in this country, when we moved to Washington D.C., and eventually we moved to a little place called McLean, Virginia, outside of D.C. And my first job in this country was cutting the grass of Bobby Kennedy's house. I do not remember exact how old I was. I'm gonna say I was like 14, and I remember that part of my job was cleaning their tennis courts, driving the tractor around. They had a beautiful house in Langley, Virginia, which is very close to the CIA headquarters. And so I thought it was a wonderful country. I thought it was a great country. We had a lot of freedom as children. We played games, we ran around, went to school, and we were very well treated by the people in this country. So I was always treated as one of the people. So I always felt very comfortable.
When you came, did you stay with like some family or something?
Very good question. That was tough. We came with nothing. We had no money. So my dad had left Cuba a little before we did. He actually escaped hiding in a meat boat, and we had relatives in this country, and he also had some friends. So when we first came, we actually split up in groups of 2s to different houses. So I went with my brother, who at the time I think was about 16. So I was with him for a while at this one family. 2 other brothers went to another family. The sisters went to different families, so we were all spread out in different families. That's a good question. And eventually, my dad was able to get a job at the Catholic University in D.C., and he was able to get an apartment. Now, it was a two-bedroom apartment. We had 5 boys in one bedroom with bunk beds, and then there were 3 sisters in the other room, and then my parents lived in the living room on a fold-out sleeping couch. And the funny part was, theoretically, you were only supposed to have 2 children in the apartment. So we only had 2 passes to the swimming pool. So we had to constantly pass it back and forth through the fence so we could all go swimming at different times. And it took about a year before they figured out what was going on. I'm sure they knew right off the bat, but they let us stay there for about a year. And then we finally were able to American dream to buy a house in McLean, Virginia, and move out to the suburbs.
When you came, did your parents plan on becoming like permanent citizens, or?
That's a good question. Like I said, both of them had been educated in this country. My dad had gotten his engineering degree from Villanova University. I think their dream was always to go back. I really feel that they could not believe that the United States would let Russia be so close to its borders. I'm sure you're aware of the Cuban Missile Crisis that occurred in 1963. So I think for a long, long time, they always felt they were going to go back to Cuba.
Yeah, so like you said, some of the difficulties when you came was like having the family split up and.
Yeah, well, again, I was a kid, so I enjoyed life. I think some of my sisters who were in their teen years were really affected by it. They basically lost their teen years. They all had to go work when they were 14 and 15, different places to help bring money back into the house. They didn't have the parties, they didn't have the nice dresses. I think that there's a group of them in the middle that were really, really affected and basically lost their teenage years. But believe it or not, at this time, and my oldest sister is now in her 70s, I'm in my 50s, we're all still alive. And we've all been very successful, mainly because of education. We all went to college. Again, this country was set up to help people go to college. Most of us went for free. And we worked hard, but we were all very successful in the American system.